mode.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Celia Gregory with Hope Street Group, and I'm so excited that you could join us tonight for our info session webinar for the Utah Teacher Fellowship, which actually launches this weekend. I'm really fortunate to have a friend and colleague, now colleague, Tabitha Pacheco on the line, and also a colleague, Catherine Correll, and a wonderful teacher fellow from North Carolina on a school night on Eastern Time joining us, and that's Trey Ferguson. So I would love to have you guys pipe up with some questions in a little bit, but we should keep this under 45 minutes, and we have a questions box if you would like to type those in, and we will address anything that we receive at the end of the presentation, but tick through some of the logistics first. So thanks a lot for joining us, and ladies, please take it away. Is that you, Catherine?
Hi, yep, it is. Sorry, I had to get myself off of mute there. Hi, this is Catherine Corral, and I am the director of the North Carolina Teacher Voice Network, which is the North Carolina Teacher Fellowship Program, which is called something different in North Carolina. We've been in North Carolina since 2015. This is our second fellowship year. And so we're really excited to see some of the things that we've been working on be scaled to Utah, but also for more teachers to become involved in the program so that we can collaborate and share and learn from each other. And also so all of you can have the same amazing opportunities and the opportunity to engage in this really unique professional development experience. So I'm going to talk through a little bit about what the fellowship program is and some of the expectations. Trey is going to provide his insight on what it's like to be a fellow. Of course, as Cecilia said, if you have any questions over the course of the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat box and we can address them later. So you'll see that the mission of Hope Street Group and the fellowship is to provide teachers with the opportunity to make meaningful contributions to design and implementation of education policy. And that's really at the heart of the program. It's a professional development experience that provides you with the training and the skills and the competencies to really meaningfully get involved in policy development. We're apolitical, we're nonpartisan, we don't have a specific agenda. More so, we just want to make sure that teachers feel emboldened, empowered, and capable to be able to sit at the table with policymakers, and also that policymakers are primed and ready to listen. So there's a few ways that we do that that make up the foundations of the fellowship program. Part of that is teacher leadership. It's education policy process and design and learning about those things. It's building relationships, and it's being able to understand data. And our trainings and our experiences that we provide all fall into those categories. So we provide you with opportunities to learn about how policy is created, who is actually making the decisions when it comes to different types of policy. Is it an administrative decision? Is it a legislative decision? Is it a state decision or a local decision? And so who should you be talking to, or who do you even share your voice with to begin with on certain decisions and certain ideas and challenges that affect your classrooms? It's about building relationships, and of course communication skills fall under that as well. So once you understand who you'd like to talk to and who the people are that are at the table, how do you deliberately craft a relationship that's positive, that's solutions oriented, and have the support of the director and the other fellows in doing that, because it is an ongoing long-term commitment to build these relationships, and it's always helpful to be part of a network to do that. But we also talk a lot about verbal and written communications. So being able to put pen to paper on your ideas and write an op-ed or write a blog post or an editorial, really fleshing out some of the ideas that you have, so that you can have that published, but also so that when you're talking with people and building these relationships, that you really have a great understanding of what the solutions or ideas or the narrative that you're talking about are. Also about sharing your story. So what is your personal teacher leadership story? What is going on in your classroom that you'd like to share? Are you grounding the solutions and the challenges that you're talking about with a certain student so that people can understand that? We walk through all of those different skill sets so that you can lead with your heart and you can lead with your mind when you're talking to these policymakers. Part of that equation too, of course, is data. So we, in a general sense, talk about data in terms of reading it and using it in these conversations, but we also engage in data collections across states so that we can collect the perspectives of your peers. So when you're building relationships, you can go into a meeting and say, I really have this strong feeling about assessments, and I know that it's not just me and it's not just my classroom. Here's the data we collected that supports my opinion, and then let me tell you a story about what this means in the classroom. So we try to bring all of those things together. So your understanding of policy, your understanding of who to build relationships with, and then understanding how to synthesize data and align that with the personal story that you might have. And that really makes up the foundations of the fellowship. It's those things really applied to any problem, to any policy, whether that's big P policy at the state level or little p policy in your school, in your local area, really bringing those things together to make an impact. So that's really high level stuff. So let me get at really what are the expectations of a fellow then under those categories. Throughout the fellowship year, we ask you to do a few different things, and of course, we're always really attentive to the cadence of the school year. But to get the most out of the fellowship, we ask you to do what you see bulleted on the screen. That first, we ask you to build and establish a network of teachers. So who are the people in your network that you're already interacting with? Who are the teachers that you rely on as thought partners? If you wanted to see what was happening beyond your classrooms when it came to a particular topic, who would you go to? Would you go to your professional organization? Would you go to a teachers association? Would you go to just the teachers in your school? We help you map that out for a few different reasons. One, because we would like to canvas those people for the data collection to share and amplify their perspectives. But also so you just have that regular give and take of a network of teachers who really also want to be involved in the process of policy development and implementation. And we want you to share your knowledge and your resources with them. So it's not only asking them to give you information and give you their opinion, but also share out to them what's going on at the legislative level, what professional development opportunities are there, what meetings have you had that you might think they might be interested in, so that they have a go-to person that they can rely on for information, and you can have a two-way network of communication. Relates to the collecting shared data. Yes.
So yeah, this is Tabitha Pacheco, and I've had the opportunity to serve as a national fellow for Hope Street Group representing Utah, and I've been involved with a lot of the Utah education policymakers. And this is very exciting work because Utah is so ready for this work to come to our state. Our state superintendent is very excited to have teacher voice. During this recent legislative session that just closed, there were so many bills passed around teacher leadership, and everyone is really anxious for our organization to get going and get feedback from teachers around what that teacher leadership means. So this is a really great time to work on building those networks, sharing teacher knowledge, collecting data, because our stakeholders, our policymakers are all primed to work with teachers, and so it's very exciting.
Thank you, Tabitha. And Tabitha, as the director, will be able to add so much color and so much context to your experience. And I'm sure that she'll talk a little bit about that more on this presentation. Because even though the work that we do at Hope Street Group is somewhat uniform in terms of the basics of the program from state to state, it's really the director and fellows and the fellows who are in that state that make it a program that's really impactful for Utah. And that's really important to note, that all of these things are not set in stone. They're basically guideposts of what we've found works in having teachers be involved in policy, but it will be crafted and adapted to what Utah's needs are, and those will change and emerge over time, and different opportunities will come up, and Tabitha will always be on hand to guide you and to create those opportunities and make sure that the fellowship is everything that you want it to be. And so the rest of the bullet points on that list are things that we think are still really important to your work. So being a local facilitator and spokesperson, we've talked about building relationships with policymakers, and to collaborate across states. So there's things in North Carolina I know that we will learn from Utah, and I hope that there are things in Utah that we'll learn in North Carolina. And then, of course, we have the program in Hawaii and Tennessee and Kentucky, and in Arizona we'll be starting up as well. And so we have this incredible network of states where teachers can share with each other. And if you're running into a stumbling block on something that relates to the fellowship, then you have all of these other programs to talk with and all of these other teachers to rely on as well. So your network can expand nationally and not just within the state. And so I don't know if right now, Tabitha, do you want to talk more about something that is specific to Utah, or do you want Trey to weigh in a little bit about his experience as a fellow?
For Utah, everything is still just, this is our first year in our launch year. So most of the advice we got is that we get to build this. So this is a very exciting year for the teachers who want to be involved to get involved and help build the program. So we can let Trey speak to his experience in his state as a fellow and what that's looked like for him.
Trey, can you take it away?
Absolutely. So just a couple things that folks have mentioned earlier on the call. This program, when it first started in North Carolina a couple years ago, really most of us thought it was going to be an advocacy program, and it is that, but I cannot stress the importance of that professional development piece. I think we all kind of took for granted that this was a opportunity for our own professional growth and development, not just in the advocacy field. We've been able to work and collaborate with teachers across our state and synthesize data and collect data and do all these different focus groups, and then weave our own story from our classroom within that data and present it to policymakers and folks at our school and district level. And so by having those experiences in the advocacy, we have grown in so many different regards as educators. And so I really want to stress that that professional development piece of it is really, really worth the hours you put into this program. What I've really enjoyed about the experience is the networking piece and meeting other teachers and policymakers and being able to talk with teachers from different parts of the state and figure out, what's going on in one part of the state and how it can kind of come back to my district, and just that networking piece, I think has really been valuable.
Trey, could you talk a little bit about your experience with the program when it comes to time commitment or your capacity to do it as a fellow while being in the classroom?
Absolutely. So, being full-time classroom teacher and taking on this type of fellowship can seem daunting, and it really is. Whatever you put into it, you're going to get out. So if you fully commit and put forth quite a bit of effort, you're going to get quite a bit out of it. And then there's some fellows who do, bare minimum, and they get something out of it, but they don't necessarily get everything you can get out of it. I've gone through different phases in the fellowship as being actively involved in a lot of different things, and then being kind of hands off on some other initiatives. But I definitely would average, I'd say if I had to average, I'm looking at 10, 15 hours a month if I were to average all the things that have fallen under the fellowship. But that includes a lot of extra opportunities that have come through the fellowship. So the baseline kind of stuff that I have done through the fellowship would be the data collection, focus groups, and doing different meetings about the data. But from those kind of basic opportunities, I've had an opportunity to go to national conferences and present on action planning, and then bringing that back and creating and starting a conference in North Carolina. I've had the opportunity to meet with our state superintendent and meet with different members of the state board and talk about different policy initiatives. through the fellowship, it's kind of opened some doors into the teacher advocacy work that I'm doing with other groups. And so again, the basic stuff in the fellowship is not terribly time consuming, but because what you're doing and what the fellowship does, because it's so good and it's good work, you kind of get hooked into all these other kind of venues for advocacy.
That's great, Trey. I'm glad that you mentioned 10 to 15 hours a month, because that's what we nail it down to as well. And I wanted to reiterate something that Trey mentioned there. Well, will provide you with the training once a year that you'll attend with those trainings. And they're formalized opportunities to learn about communications and developing relationships and having conversations and moderating focus groups. But a lot of the learning takes place when you actually experience the opportunities that Tabitha will put in front of you, and you start to gain confidence and you become fluent in the conversations that you might have to have. You know, I think it's difficult even for me to go into a room of General Assembly members in North Carolina, and they might be real estate agents or accountants, and to turn off sort of the straight education policy, and for you all as classroom teachers, part of my mind, and say, okay, this person has been talking about Medicaid for the past 3 days. They're an accountant. Maybe they have a kid in school. Maybe they don't. How can I get across to them what I'm trying to say about education? And you can use the trainings that we've provided. They certainly help. But until you regularly put yourself in those situations to become fluent, that's when you'll really cross the barrier into being competent and being at the table for policy. And so take advantage of those opportunities. The other thing that I wanted to point out too was what Trey works on as a fellow could be different from what another fellow works on. So there's a baseline of collections that we do, and we ask questions in terms of policy and what they'd like to ask people. So Trey has done a lot of work with math standards in North Carolina. There's another fellow in North Carolina who's done a lot with reading tests, third grade reading tests. And so what they talk about with policymakers may look very different, but the Hope Street group training is the foundation of all of that. And that's where we are an advocacy group, and we are a teacher voice group, because that's what the teachers are doing. But we are also really at our heart a professional development teacher leadership program. So Tabitha, could you, or Celia, could you go back just quickly to that time investment slide? So just to give you, be able to see with the bullet points what Trey was talking about with the 10 to 15 hours a month, you'll see on there that there's 3 to 4 in-person convenings per year, the facilitation of the data collection, 2 written pieces you'll be asked to complete, and there's an editorial board and a process for editing and publishing that, monthly calls or webinars, and then those periodic optional opportunities that we've been referencing, the impersonal communication and virtual communication with policymakers, and then learning with and from your peers and managing your network. That all ends up being about 10 hours per month, and that's really the trajectory that will take you to competency in being involved in policy. So with that, that's our description of the program and what you can expect from it. Celia, were you advancing to the application phase to talk a little bit how you might get involved and how you can apply?
Yes, sorry. And thanks for bearing with us, folks. I had a couple technical difficulties. Again, we're all in different time zones. I want to go back to the screen I had for the timeline. So we're going to talk about a little bit sort of where we are and why we did this today, to give you a little bit of lead time to prepare to apply, which our application window will be a full month long in the month of April. But, you know, never too early to start looking at what's expected so you can get all those pieces in. I mentioned my name is Celia, but you will probably know me from henceforth as fellowship@hopestreetgroup.org. That is the information, excuse me, email address related to all things about this fellowship. And we will, once you have created an application, sort of nudge you along and make sure you have what you need. And if you have any difficulties, move you through that. And I'll show you with our actual site sort of a demo of what you can expect it to look like. But in terms of the timeline here, we are launching the application on Saturday. So if you are a late night Friday person and want to just get her done, you can do that starting midnight on April 1st. And it will be open, like I said, until April 30th. That is a hard deadline. A couple reasons for that. We think that 4 weeks, if you have all the components ready to go and you know what's expected in the application process, is enough time. And primarily because we want this to be locked up before the end of the school year. So especially since our summer orientation is when you have the first chance to always, to all be together. And Tabitha can start forging relationships with accepted fellows before then. So that's really the reason for the month period that it's open. We do something really neat, like Trey spoke to. There's so many different opportunities within the fellowship beyond things that are required. And this year we had more fellows than ever serve as application reviewers. This is a sort of peer-led process. So when I show you the narrative response questions, you will be asked to write, and that's our first chance of getting to know you. You are actually being reviewed by teacher peers in different states where we have our programs, and also national fellows. So that's your first impression is made to teachers, and then folks that move on to the second round will actually get to talk to Tabitha for a phone interview stage. So like I said, by the end of May, hopefully even before Memorial Day weekend is our goal, to have folks notified of their status. And then the orientation will be July 10th and 11th. I actually, with a couple minutes left, I don't know if Trey, you would want to speak to how we sort of kick off the fellowship. You've had 2 summer convenings at this point, but maybe speak to what your first orientation did to really kick off the fellowship and why that's so important and why we consider it mandatory for new fellows to be there and have that first round of professional learning.
So that very first convening where all of the fellows got together, and for this was when the program was new to our state, and so it was really just kind of a crash course in what we were expected to do in that first year. It was a really important networking opportunity. Again, we met so many people and so many teachers from across the state and just hearing those stories of what was going on in the western part of the state or the eastern part of the state, and that alone was worth the convening. But we had time to kind of really dive into some protocols and some practice with our elevator speeches and being able to, present ourselves. How do we address policymakers? What did they mean by data collection? What were we going to use this data collection for? And so the first convening was a lot of information, and again, kind of set the tone for, okay, what needed to get done, what's our timeline, etc. And I think what was really valuable is after that first kind of, information kind of dump on everyone, it was then the next convening after we had gone through the program and when we had a data and a report, we were able to then really kind of unpack that and weave our stories within it. So I think both of those convenings are very powerful, kind of to kick off the program, but then also to kind of recap what have we done thus far, and then what are we going to do with it. And so you gain momentum on both of those.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's worth noting. So with all that timeline, most of your work will be virtual, and that's the easiest way to connect with other teachers in different parts of the state. And in fact, with your director as well. So you're fortunate to get FaceTime if you live nearby. And of course, when there are professional learning opportunities outside of the 3 convenings. But a real hallmark of the fellowship program is that quality in-person time, that 3 times a year. So definitely the July 10th and 11th convening, as we said, will be the first chance for all fellows to get together. And so, of course, your travel is compensated and your stay, but that'll be really deep learning and powerful networking to kick off the fellowship and your first chance to, meet all of your peers. So happy to answer questions about that at the end too, but that's sort of the brief timeline so you know why we're really pushing you to finish your application when I continue to ping you in April. And I will show you, since everybody spoke so wonderfully to why you would consider applying and what this fellowship looks like, I'd like to show you a little bit how, because that can be the trickier part, although I find this website to be pretty user-friendly. So hopefully by now, because you made your way to this webinar, you've also received promotion for the application site itself, which we have several fellowships, as Catherine mentioned, and we have just recently recruited for our Hawaii, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Tennessee state fellowships, and then we will launch Arizona the same day as you guys on Saturday. So our main landing page sort of is a hub for everybody, apply.hopestreetgroup.org. I will push you to it just since we have a really nice impact video, and also sort of the general, because there are more commonalities across the programs than there are differences, even with the state contexts. This is sort of what we do. What is the fellowship? And what are these opportunities that Trey just spoke to? But I'm hoping you will bookmark this page instead, which is that Utah specific landing page that's up here. And I will push you back to this tomorrow. And also this webinar will be archived on this page tomorrow. So if you couldn't check in for the entire thing, or you want a refresher and watch it again, or especially if you'd like to share this opportunity with other teachers you know, this would be a great place to push them, because this is where they will form an application and they can check out what's expected in the application process. So here there's a load of information, but we also have it downloadable to PDF. So that's another easy way to share. We do have the 5 required components, so you know what's expected in the application itself. We'll ask you a few questions, personal background information, really just so we know who you are and where you teach and what you teach. We are looking, and Tabitha might speak to this, for a really nice representative group of teachers across the state. So something important to note is you don't have to have X number of years in the classroom. You just have to be hungry for this type of work. And we love to have really diverse cohorts with a lot of teacher perspectives represented. And that includes different subject matter and grade levels, different size school, rural, suburban, urban, the whole lot. So that personal background information is just a snapshot of who you are and who's applying. Again, we ask that you commit to attend the orientation. The narrative response questions, again, that's the bulk of your application. I think that's the piece that will take you the longest time. So I'll show you what that looks like in the system. But these are the 3 questions, the way they're worded. And they are packed, boy. It's technically 3, but there's a lot here. So I do encourage you early in the application window to take a look at these, spend some time digging into your journey as an educator and experiences you've had collaborating with your peers and others, and drawing some great examples to answer these questions. And again, those will be scored by teacher fellows, current and former, in all of our programs. So yeah, you're speaking directly to other teachers. You will upload a current resume. Somebody asked on our last session, how long does it need to be? How current? We do want to sort of have that consistency in the application materials and your resume. So where you've worked, who you are. I just also think it's a nice element for any sort of professional opportunity like this. And there might be things that are there that you weren't able to squeeze into your 500-word answers. So upload a current resume in PDF or doc form. And then number 5 is important. So it's 2 parts. You have to request an expression of support from your administrator. So they just have a heads up that you are applying to this program and would permit you to have those professional learning opportunities in the next school year. And that would be school year 17-18. But your requesting it does not check it off of the box. They actually have to submit that expression of support. So I'll show you what that looks like. But suffice to say, that's sort of a 2-part to finish your application. So if you were to click this, yeah.
Celia, I just wanted to speak to the letter of support from your administrator. I'm sure that all of your administrators so want to support you, but we all know that we're starting testing season and it's an extra busy time of school year. So I would recommend that you ask for that letter of support very first thing, like this weekend, or as soon as you start on the application. Email them, talk to them and say, hey, I'm sending this to you. Can you please get on this? Because I know your administrator can get distracted, and there's so many other fires putting out as we're starting testing that they might need a reminder or some extra time to make sure they get that letter in on time.
Yeah. And actually, it's a little less intimidating than a letter. We try to make it easy for them. It's a really good point, Tabitha, because they're always busy. We don't want this to be the hang up for you in your application because, like we said, if you were drawn to this type of opportunity, we're pretty sure that you do have a supportive administrator who wants you to shine in this way on behalf of your school and your district and your part of the state. But it is something to do, right? It's something in their inbox. So absolutely giving that person a heads up with a personal email and sharing with them this application website, and maybe make it easy for them too, and just attach the PDF here that you can download so they know what the Utah Teacher Fellowship is. You can point them back to this webinar. I'm speaking right to them. And anything that you think would be helpful, including our hopestreetgroup.org website, so they know what we do as an organization and that we have successful fellowships in other states. Just sort of ground what this is. So before they get the automatic email that's generated from the website, from the application site, they're already on board and have given you that thumbs up, and also they're expecting it. But to Tabitha's point about a letter, we really do make it easy, and it's just a simple yes or no checkbox with the opportunity to write more and brag all up and down about how great you are. But it's not required. They really just have to sign off on that they know you're applying and they support your candidacy for this fellowship, given potentially 2 to 3 days out of school next year. So maybe mention that too. Say it's going to be an automatic email sent, but it should take fewer than 5 minutes, because that could be a holdup if somebody thought they needed to get around to writing a formal letter of recommendation. Mind you, we do accept those and certainly include it with your application materials if they chose to. But all of those are scored equally when it comes to them signing off on your candidacy. So we don't want that to be an intimidating factor for you or for the principal, but it is something that you need to have completed in the application when by the 30th. So if you're on this landing page here, you would click sign up to create an account. I do want to mention, since we're coming up at the end of the school year when we'll be making announcements, it'll ask here in your application for, I think, a phone number and an alternate phone number, but it just has one email which is attached to your account. I would recommend, because it's not mandatory to use your school email, if that's the one you check the most often, and maybe you have it on your phone or you check it at home, sure, you can use your school email. But if you use a personal email address more often and would be checking that perhaps over spring break or after Memorial Day, if you've not yet been contacted, use whatever email address you're going to be most accessible by, so you don't miss any important correspondence. I will also mention that sometimes these messages get hung up in school firewalls and such, so that's an extra reason to give your principal the heads up, and also possibly for you to use an address that won't get caught in spam or junk mail. But we've done everything on this end to make sure that our messages from fellowship at hopestreetgroup.org, as sent from this website, can reach the teachers that have applied. So if you clicked sign up, that is what it'll ask you to do, is create an email address and password. And this will be your first step in applying. It seems like this could be it, but it's not. It's just which fellowship are you applying to, because we have multiples. And it would ask you to start and select here the Utah Teacher Fellowship. So again, this is sort of a dummy application, but it's temporarily open so I can show you what happens next, which is that it shows that's complete, but you have to scroll down to then see what your fellowships are that you're eligible for. So this one was a Tennessee application that's already finished from last time. I'm going to click View Fellowships, and it's going to show what's now open for you, which is the Utah Teacher Fellowship. It'll show your deadlines, which will actually be 4/1 to 4/30. And then you can click Apply Now. This is going to be your main application pane. So once you've created that first step, that which fellowship are you applying to, when you log in, it should go to this sort of home screen most often, and it'll just bump you to show your progress and where with the different components you are. So here on the right sidebar, it shows that you are 0% complete at this point and shows you what's left. And also here is where you will start each piece of this application. So for instance, the personal information start, it's a form that looks just like this. And make sure to double check your work, especially with the drop downs, and then click Save or click Next. It will not let me advance unless I've finished that piece, or it won't call it finished. But that's what it will show. It'll show complete in green when that status is changed. Likewise for narrative responses. Now you can go in and edit before you click submit. You can go in and so if you do those in multiple sittings, my recommendation would be to maybe construct those answers in a Word document and then copy paste so you know you have it just right. But make sure all three of those are there, and then you would would show complete as well. Upload resume I mentioned. This is the request administrator support piece on your end. It'll ask you who this person is, first name, last name, email address again. How do you know this person? That just means, is this your building level administrator, so a principal, or maybe it's your superintendent, but it does need to be somebody in a sort of a supervisory role. And then here's those same tips we mentioned to give that person the heads up with a personal email that they should be receiving this email. And if you have any trouble, or if that person has any trouble, you swear that you've sent the request and they swear they're not getting it, you can reach out to me at fellowship@hopestreetgroup.org. But we found a good bit of success doing it through the website once you direct them to check their spam folder. And then it's just a really quick, easy checkbox, as I mentioned. So that is all of the number of components here. Like Tabitha suggested, I would go ahead and get on the administrator support piece, since that relies on somebody other than you as well. And then the narrative responses. Really take your time with those. And the rest of the application shouldn't take too terribly long. And this would be highlighted so that you could click submit once these prerequisites were all met. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I will point you to this same piece over here on the right. It'll show you your progress as you go. If you learn at any point during this this application window that you've already started, but you can no longer commit, or you've had another leadership opportunity that will start and overlap and you're going to choose that, or if you are offered an administrative position for next school year and you learn that in the middle of this application process. This teacher fellowship is for classroom teachers and instructional coaches. So those would be some situations where if you must, you could withdraw your application, and that'll just mean you stop receiving all of the messages from me about being in process and pushing you to the finish line. So I think that's it, and it's pretty user-friendly. But again, you can always reach out to me or have your administrator do the same if you're having issues, especially well before the deadline, so we can rectify those before the very last minute and the last day. Catherine, Tabitha, or Trey, anybody want to weigh in before we take some questions on the application site? It's the application process in general and how applicants can best prepare to put their best foot forward for this opportunity.
I'll chime in there. It's Catherine. I would say if you're interested in this opportunity and you'd like to have the best application possible, use specific examples that relate to the questions that we're asking. Try to give real color to the story of why you'd like to be a part of the program. The questions that we ask are fairly open-ended, but make sure that you're giving us a really good idea of your skill set and your ability to engage in this kind of work. And then really, just like we train you to do and like we encourage you to do better and better over time, share your personal stories. That's what I think the reviewers like to read, and that gives us the best picture of who you are as an applicant.
For sure. Thank you, Catherine. And yeah, Catherine welcomes new fellows pretty soon here. Like we said, we just wrapped that recruitment process, so we are fresh on that and excited about the Utah and Arizona application. So I will open it up to questions if there are no more comments from our folks, and then we can lob you some of these your way. Somebody has asked about the size of the cohort that we're looking to bring on board. I can lob to Tabitha, but I can speak generally and say it's always a manageable number, and that's something different about our state fellowships than maybe some fellowships elsewhere, is that we really make sure that there are opportunities for small group and one-on-one networking and learning, like their work group structures that Catherine mentioned, and make sure you have relationships with the director as well, since that becomes your number one cheerleader in this process in addition to one another. So that sounds vague. Tabitha, I believe we're looking in the ballpark of a couple dozen or fewer, so it will be a competitive process. Anything to color in there? Okay, either you're on mute or that's a good enough answer.
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Yeah, we are. Celia was correct, about a couple dozen. We're looking for about 20 teacher fellows, and the Utah Fellowship has the unique opportunity that we are partnering with NNSTOY. So we will have some previous state teachers of the year who are participating as mentors in our program. So about 20 teachers is what we're looking for.
Wonderful. And while I have you, while you're still on the mic, Tabitha, question about the convening that's in July, and where is that located?
Sure. Our first convening will be located in downtown Salt Lake City.
Fantastic. And yes, all accepted fellows will have a good bit of lead time for planning that and coordinating that travel. So we're just asking now at the time of the application that you save those 2 full dates. And then if there were special travel considerations, say coming from a different vacation spot or something like that, we could work that out, but you would just need to participate in both of those days. If any other attendees have questions, you can type them into the question box. And of course, we will be available ongoing from the fellowship address. If something comes up, or if you marinate on this for a little bit and you have additional questions in preparation to apply. I'm not a teacher, so I'm terrible at wait time. It's not something I practice in my everyday life. Tabitha can attest to that on all of our webinars. Okay, great. One more came in. How often will this opportunity be available? Like maybe this year is not the best time, but the following year would be better. We absolutely intend to recruit new fellows each year. So there's a really neat opportunity, like Trey is finishing his second year. He has had the opportunity to work with first year fellows and sort of impart some of his mad knowledge from his months thus far in the fellowship to this new class. And then the folks that just were recruited and will join the current year ones as year twos next year, will just sort of pay it forward. So there's always that passing of the baton, and again, a real representative sample of teachers in a state. So we will be recruiting again fellows next year. And the fellowship is typically 12 months with the opportunity to extend to a second year, sort of based on what you are putting in and getting out of the fellowship, and tracking along those goals and all those activities that they mentioned are opportunities for you. But those are always the conversations you have with the state director. And yes, there is a stipend of $1,000 paid in quarterly payments for the work, again, along those goals and competencies and the fellowship timeline. So that would be definitely all that information will be submitted to folks that are accepted into the fellowship, so we can get you squared away and compensate you for your efforts. This would be a better one answered maybe by Catherine or Trey that's done this before. Is the data collection along the lines of an action study?
Tabitha, do you want to weigh in on that for Utah? If not, I can speak to North Carolina.
Hey, I can speak on my national experience on the research that I did for Utah for our study. So ours was done more as focus groups and surveys along a national topic that we were all focusing on, with a final report that was published that was based more on the qualitative data and narratives, the responses that we got from teachers, but that was from our national study. So Catherine, if you want to talk about some of the different state work you've done, that'd be great.
So in North Carolina, and this is typical of states in general, we partner with the State Education Association, and here in North Carolina also with the state board, to develop a list of questions that they're interested in hearing from teachers about. So whatever's ripe, top of mind for them, things that they want to take action on and would just like a little bit more perspective around. Maybe they have a strategic plan that they'd like some more insights on. We work with them to guide that. Because it makes more sense for us to collect perspectives on something that they're eager to hear about than for us to judge what that might be and then bring them a set of random information. So we have a quantitative survey that goes out to teachers across the state, and then we have follow-up focus groups that are related to the same topics to collect qualitative data. Both the quantitative data and the qualitative data are sent out for analysis, and then we get a report back with both all the charts and the graphs and the demographics, all of that, usually disaggregated by some geographic demarcation that's meaningful to Utah or to whatever state it is that we're working in. And then based on that data, there's a set of recommendations for policy that come out of that. Some of those can be really small. It can be something like, we recommend that more teachers have training in how to use the state education agency's website or professional development offerings. Some of it could be more directed towards legislative decisions that involve teacher compensation. But whatever it is, it ends up being a starting point for conversations, but it also are things that the policymakers can take direct action on. So I hope that answers your question.
Great. Well, I think we're a couple of minutes past our 45 minutes, but that's all the questions I've seen come in. And I got a yes, thank you from that person who posed that question. So yeah, thank you three for being on this webinar. And again, I'm sort of running logistics, but current fellows, current state directors, and then of course our new director, Tabitha, are really the best resources when you can follow folks on Twitter and see the work of our fellowships that are more established. It'll really give you a great view into what's possible for Utah. And you're going to have such amazing leadership and a current national fellow turned Utah director. So we couldn't be happier to do this and partner with NNSTOY and join your state and really tap into all the wonderful teacher leadership that we know is just simmering there. So please let me know if I can be of any help at fellowship@hopestreetgroup.org. Otherwise, we hope we start seeing your applications roll in, as we said, early in the 4-week period. So we're not harassing you to get it finished, but if there's anything we can help you do to make sure you have everything you need and can apply by the 30th, we were happy to do that. So thanks for joining this webinar tonight. And again, it will be archived and you can share tomorrow, but I will follow up once that is live, so you know you can visit this webpage again and see it. Thank you, everybody.